Welcome to the Windows Phone Lightning Design Reviews. I'm Lincoln Anderson with 352 Media Group. I'm going to take a look at two apps today and talk about how they can be tweaked to be a little bit more usable, a little more pretty on the Windows Phone. So let's jump right into it. First app to look at is called BandFunk. This app is meant to help you find bands primarily that are playing in your area and keep track of information on the venue, what date and time it's playing, who else is playing, get directions to the location, that sort of thing. So that's really clean. It looks really good. The designer's even gone to the effort of presenting pivot views in this sort of rolled out type of presentation with a Nokia phone overlaid, so you can kind of get a feel for how the interface is sliding underneath the phone. It's a useful presentation when for panoramas and pivots, because not everyone is familiar with them during the wireframing or design stages. So being able to show them as one big page that's sliding around communicates that idea effectively. So this is really clean. I think everything in this is pretty easy to understand. It's my understanding that the artists you see on the very first view are artists that you've selected as your favorites. If that's the case, I might suggest just changing the title to be My Artists or My Favorites or something like that. Or if there is a view for favorites, that's clearly labeled. The other label I wasn't sure about was More, all the way on the right. I'm not sure if that's like highly rated artists or the app is recommending them to me for some reason. Like Nearby, I get that. It's like just proximity that it's choosing those artists. Just wasn't sure what More was, so maybe just some more clear labeling on how those artists are being populated in that list would be useful for the user. The only minor just design thing on this page, and actually both the apps we're about to look at, is just little alignment suggestions. So if you look at the lines that I've drawn on the screen that are just these very light blue lines, you can see that the titles and the form elements on this first screen, BandFunk Artists, and the text box for Add Artists, they all line up on this left margin, and then the pictures or the tiles for the bands underneath don't line up to that line. So it's really minor, but these types of like little alignments add up to your app looking really clean and polished and slick. So you want to make sure that you follow that. And if you use the Windows Phone grid and you follow that pretty closely, you should be in pretty good shape. But bottom line, you just want to line stuff up. So it looks clean. If you look over on the right side, so that's the vertical line. I was just pointing that out with this vertical line. The horizontal line, what I'm pointing out is how, if you look at under More, there's an artist that looks like he's playing the cello, and his name is Charles Curtis. All that content is lined up to that horizontal line. But if we look under Nearby, there's a DJ here, and that picture isn't lined up. It's almost like it's center aligned with the block of content to the right of it. And so it just kind of gives this like up and down kind of wonkiness to that element of the interface. So it might have just been that the designer's finger slipped, or there might be some alignment choices made that weren't quite the best. But yeah, I would vertically align the photos with the titles of the artists across the board. This kind of carries through to like the tile layout on the first screen here. You can see that there's a margin in between the tiles, like in between each tile row, and then there's a margin between the columns, and you can tell that it's not the same. It's a little skinnier. Again, really minor, really nitpicky, but it's just one of those things that if you're consistent with your margins and alignment, it's just going to add up to looking a lot more polished. And this app is like 99% of the way there. The text labels on these photos are a little bit hard to read sometimes, so I have suggestions for that. If you look at, I'm going to tab over to my browser. If you look at different iterations of the Xbox interface have had a solution for this. I think this is the current version right now. I just found these pictures on the web, but I think this is the current version where they actually provide a shaded dark box around the text area. And that's just because the text is white. It just helps it contrast a little bit more. The previous version of the Xbox interface, they used a gradient. Now, gradients are kind of frowned upon in the Windows Phone design language. We try to use like solid colors and just be very clear with when we determine what areas need to have high contrast. But if you didn't want to do the bar looking thing and you just want it to be a little softer and blend in with the picture a little bit more, this is, I think, a perfectly fine solution. And you can tell, like, let's say in this X-Men graphic here, the text, if it was on the white X, it'd be really hard to read. But they just provided a little black backdrop, so it's contrasts a little bit better. Looking at a few more screens on this BandFunk app, this is where you would dive into a particular artist and see some details about them. Again, really clean. It's really easy to understand everything. There's no distractions. All the sections are titled in a way that makes sense. I just would pay attention to some of the alignment. If you look at like the word here under news, Frank Turner, and then your eye moves to the left, you see punk, and it's not, I don't think the vertical alignment is quite there. So again, it just like gives you kind of this like up and down kind of feeling. If you look at under shows, the pictures are not vertically aligned with the Coachella text there. So really minor stuff, but I think it'll get it that extra 1% of polish to align all that stuff. This is a page that you would see if you selected a certain show and you wanted to get information like where is it, when is it happening, and who else will be playing, maybe an opening act or whatever. So this is pretty good. So I had a couple of suggestions. One was that I felt like the date and the time should be a little bit more prominent. I don't know that I would put it under the venue section. Venue to me is just where it's, I think that's the definition of venue, is just where it's occurring. So I might take the date and time out and actually kind of include that as part of the title section, so that's always visible. Because that's really what this page is about. It's about the event. I didn't quite understand the picture of the band, how that fits into the pivot. It just kind of feels like it's stuck in the middle somewhere. Maybe this is a panorama, and it's just sort of like pictures are kind of sprinkled around as you're panning through it. I wasn't quite sure. If you wanted to have another section that was like gallery, or you wanted to take the photo of the band and work it into the title somehow, that might be interesting. It just feels kind of weird floating in the middle there. Maybe there's a title missing in between here that I can't see, but in between venue and performers that's like gallery or something like that. I'm not sure. So I kind of did, this is off to the left, is taking that page and bringing the date out a little bit and using more of a traditional pivot for venue and performers. So I feel like having the date up there and being a little bit more human friendly, saying Wednesday and the month, I think that's a little bit more user friendly. Another thing I did, this is really just kind of up to you, but I think it looks nice whenever you have a map control that it actually spans the entire width of the display. I feel like it just looks cleaner, and it makes you, maps they have so much detail in them, it's very easy to feel kind of crammed into a little box. So the more screen real estate you can give a map, the better it feels. The other thing was just putting a marker on the map of exactly where the location is. I think maybe that's probably just something that hasn't been worked in yet by the designer, but you want to make sure that that's clearly visible on the map. Whatever you could use a little dot or whatever you want to use. This is the live tile. These are examples of live tiles that you could use in this app. You can pin particular events, particular artists, whatever, to your start screen, and depending on how much space you give it, you get more or less detail. I think this is awesome. This is exactly the kind of app that can take advantage of all the different ways of pinning deeper content of tiles and exposing really useful information. So you know, you can imagine tapping on any one of these tiles lets you dive right into the particular artist or venue and get directions on it. I think that's super useful if you're planning on going to a show and you want to just tap right in and jump right to where the location is and see the map. Like, these are great tiles. This screen shows some of the app bar functionality. I think this is a great example of how to use the app bar. The things that you know you're going to want to use very frequently, like following, pin to start, share, those are circle buttons. There's 3 of them, which is an odd number of circle buttons is always best because it just looks more symmetrical, looks clean. They're clearly labeled. And then additional options which you're going to want access to, but maybe don't need to be visible all the time, like emailing it to a friend or down in the extended app bar. It's a custom color has been chosen for this, a dark, this orange color, but the white contrasts with it perfectly, so it looks good, even though it's got its own custom branding to it. So I don't really have anything else to say on this particular screen. It all looks really good. The next app we're going to look at is called Mobile Muni for municipal transportation, I think. But this is basically, it's a location-specific app for targeting San Francisco, and I believe it's just for San Francisco. And it's basically helping you find your way from point A to point B, but using public transportation, buses, and also walking. And then kind of giving you an idea of how long your trip is going to take based on these different segments of the trips. It's very specific to transportation in San Francisco. So the app I checked it out on the App Store. You can download it. It's getting a lot of good reviews. People find it to be really useful and they love it. So I don't want to reinvent the wheel on this app. Sometimes when I see a screen like this, I kind of get a little overwhelmed, like, oh, there's all these buttons all over the place. What's going on? And I kind of want to take a fresh stab at it. But people really like this app. So I just want to talk about kind of cleaning it up a little bit, just to make some of these interfaces a little nicer. So here's one example. This is just taking the flip start destination button and moving that up to be a little icon-driven button in between the 2 locations. So the reason that I did that was that I want the button Find Routes, which is like the main, that's how you complete the form. That's how you say, all right, I put my locations in, they look good, go. I want that to be very clear as the big button on the page. I don't want to have to make the user read through flip start destination. Okay, yeah, no, I don't want to do that. I want them to their eye to just be drawn immediately to Find Routes. It's very clearly in the screen on the right. It's very clearly the final button on the page. The other reason is like flip start / dest. You've got a dest as an abbreviation for destination. You're clearly trying to fit a lot into that button, and it's something that if just a smaller button with an icon can achieve the exact same effect. I think people will understand what this means because it's, if you look at Bing Maps or Google Maps or something, that's pretty much what the interface looks like. So I think people will get it. I moved the labels for start and destination up above the fields, and I made the fields a little longer. It's kind of a judgment call. I feel like it reduces the noise a little bit on the page. It just kind of, it feels like there's less going on when you do it that way. But it does reduce the screen real estate for the map by a little bit. So it's kind of a judgment call a little bit. The other thing that I did was I removed the border. It was like a 1-pixel border in between the form and the map. I don't know that border is really necessary. I just kind of am take the approach of like, let's reduce as much clutter as possible and see what we really need. And if you find that in some instances of the map it's hard to tell where the edge of it is, then maybe reintroduce that border. But yeah, looks pretty good though. This is what you can do is you can choose you can choose a particular place as a destination, but it'll use Foursquare locations nearby as sort of like a list of suggestions. So this is pretty cool. I was wondering if this is really tailored to San Francisco, if we could include photos of some of these locations, if photos are available. Maybe icons are okay, but as the app kind of grows in popularity and more people are using it, we could start to introduce photos here. I feel like that could be much more personalized to the city. And that it's not just Union Square, someone who built this app in New York entered it in there and has never been there, but there's actual photo of someone who took it in your city. I think that could be cool. I think it's also useful because you can see that for these parks, there's a park that's the second item, and then there's down on the bottom there's another park. You can see they have the same icon. So the more that you're using the icons, the less meaning they have. Especially, I imagine there'll be a lot of restaurants in some of these areas, and so to go there and just see a bunch of whatever, probably like a fork and a knife or something, to just see like 10 forks and knives, well, that's not incredibly helpful. But to see a photo, maybe with an icon too, a photo of the place with a little icon of a fork and knife, like, would kind of give it more of a personalized, homegrown feel, I think. But otherwise, this screen looks really. This is the screen where you could see different routes, different ways to get from your starting point to your destination. And I was a little overwhelmed when I first saw this screen. I started thinking about how to rearrange some of this information. But actually, I think the general layout of it, once I understood everything, the general layout of it is actually pretty good. But I'm going to make one suggestion, that red lines, again, it's that vertical alignment that I was talking about earlier. I would take each one of the headings for these, J Church, F Market, and align those to the top, and I would add a little bit more margin in between each one of the routes. So it's very clear. I'll just go back a slide. Right now, if you just look at the right side of the screen, it's very difficult to tell where one set of instructions ends and the next picks up. But you can use alignment and padding to make that a lot more clear, and really, as far as like text sizes and the content that you have and how it's written, you don't really need to touch that at all. That all makes a lot of sense. Final, just a question about this screen was, how important is it how important is the duration of the trip? And how important is it how soon there's going to be a bus you need to catch or something like that? So just one example, it might be cool to include the entire estimated duration of the trip as part of the heading. So you can see, oh, this route this route is walking and takes 15 minutes. This route is taking the bus and takes 5 minutes. I don't know. Second part of this whole thing was, on the right side, I can see from current location to Powell Station outbound is 6 minutes. There's a bus in 1 minute, 6 minutes, 18 minutes. Right away, I can tell that first bus, I'm not going to make it. I'd have to really book it to make that. So I just think the connections that you need to make are, there's plenty of bus lines, so there's not, it's not like, oh, you missed the one in 6 minutes. Well, you're just going to have to sleep on the street tonight because there's no more buses. There's a lot of transportation available in San Francisco, but I would just say if what's on this screen can help me make a better decision by kind of giving me more of an overview, or maybe making a recommendation to me on which times I should try to beat, that might be a little bit more helpful. The next screen we're going to look at, I think this is the last one. So this is a route overview. So you can just see, this is a bus route, I believe, and you can see where all the stops are on the map. You can also switch to inbound versus outbound. It's kind of like a toggle. Really, I think that the help that this screen could use is in the heading area. I see the number 27, and then I see 27-Bryant, and then I see inbound, and then I see switch to outbound as a button. Just a lot of things going on. I feel like some of it's redundant. Not 100% sure. I don't live in San Francisco. Maybe 27 and 27-Bryant. Those are important distinctions or something. I'm just going to throw this out there for the developer. I'm making the number for the route just kind of like big and light. I'm using the Seago light font for this. I'm just making it big and beautiful, and I'm using Bryant, which I think is Bryant is the indication of what direction you're going in. Like that's the destination. So right now I'm looking at inbound, and I'm using like a pivot here. So I could slide left or right, or I could tap on outbound, and I would see the outbound map. And also when I did that, Bryant would update to show the other destination. I don't know what the other end of that route is. So so the pivot becomes your toggle instead of it being a button. Excuse me, a button. And I think that that's important because a button kind of represents like you're doing something, and pivots and panoramas and navigational controls, they're more like exploring different aspects of content. They're navigation. And really, when I think about viewing the inbound versus viewing the outbound routes, I think of that as navigating, not so much applying a command of some sort. So I hope that's useful. I feel like it's a little prettier, at least. The last screen we're going to look at is, I swear this is the last one, is this is the route screen. So this is just a more detail about a particular route. So there's a lot going on this screen, and I kind of struggled with how do we kind of clean this up and reduce some of the clutter. If you watch some of my previous webinars, you can see that sometimes I will use the app bar as a contextual command area. So really, you would maybe when you're on this screen, the app bar has add to favorite and pin to start in it. And these other commands like search and whatnot, those are available in the extended options, but maybe we take some of these buttons up here, which are really contextual commands for the page, and move them down here as circle buttons. You can use a heart and a circle as an add to favorite, and the thumbtack as the pin to start. I think that would reduce some of this clutter. I would also think about maybe a different type of treatment with these buttons. Actually, this is a question for the developer. These buttons, I'm not sure if tapping them immediately shows you where the route is on this map, or if it navigates you to a different, like to a new page where you can see basically the screen you're looking at now, but for the KT route or the L route. If it's a navigation like that, I might consider a different type of treatment for these. I wouldn't do like a pivot, but maybe making them look more like a tile, like making the letters, maybe white letters in a solid maroon square, making the letters a little bit bigger. Something about presenting them as buttons just makes it feel a little bit cluttered and busy to me. But you know, they're really useful to have there. I think it's great that the developer's not just saying, hey, these routes are here, but also providing a way to dive in and get more information on each of those. So yeah, just in summary, alignment and just kind of reducing some of the clutter, looking at some of these elements like these horizontal lines and asking, do we really need those? Or can we achieve the same sort of effect with just good alignment and margins? So that's it for this session. This is also the last session for a while. I'm not really sure how long. We love doing these, so if you've enjoyed the series, tell people about them. We love to see people watching the videos on our page at 352media.com/apptothefuture, and if we get a lot of great feedback over Twitter and whatnot, we'll see if we can start up another season. Thanks a lot. This has been helpful for you. Take care.